Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Original Thinkers Presents. I'm David Holbrooke, founder and ringleader of Original Thinkers. We don't know what's happening, as always, with our October Festival, but we do know that Original Thinkers are out there, and this is their time. It's the way they think and the way they operate. And so we want to talk to a bunch of folks, and today I'm really excited to be joined by a relatively new friend, but I feel like I've known him forever, a wonderful guy named Peter Sims. And Peter's I think a hyphenate, a classic hyphenate of an entrepreneur, a writer, a thinker, a gatherer, all these things. And I really consider him an international man of mystery. Peter, nice to see you, man. Is that a good introduction? Did I get that right?
I'm an international man of mystery. I'm honored.
I like it. I think you are. I mean, well, we hung out in Mexico, and you're here, and you're there, and you show up in this place and that place. But what we've come to know each other as, and this is important to the audience, is as the founder of Black Sheep, BLKSHP, and Peter started this organization how many years ago?
Well, the kernel of the idea was 2012, and then it became formalized with a business model 4 years ago. So
yeah, so I'm going to do a little bit of Black Sheep. If you could elaborate on what this really is, and what I've been involved with is really gatherings and bringing people together from disparate worlds, from music, from business, from all kinds of different places, and having them vibe on each other. And you come away from these gatherings thinking, one, I want to do more because I'm inspired by the people I'm meeting. But two, you have to think differently about everything that's going on. And I think, as I understand, please elaborate, Black Sheep are the people who are going to go in their own direction, but they're the people who are going to create, who are going to rub against the grain. And then what is going to result are companies like Pixar, who I know were really formulative in your thinking, and a bunch of other outside the box organizations. Tell us some more about Black Sheep and the way it came about.
I think we all have an inner artist, and we all want to express ourselves creatively if we have the opportunities to. And people in this community have a lot more of that in the forefront of their lives, but there are a lot of others who would like to be more creative. And so really, we, from the outset, were inspired to create a place, a community, a platform for people to be able to unlock their inner artist. And the term Black Sheep itself came out of Pixar, which was very formative on my thinking, because Pixar is a place where when you walk in and you go to the building that's the central building that Steve Jobs designed, it's a place where people from all different disciplines come together in an atrium that has, a lot of natural light to co-create. And in that case, they're creating animation films, and I wasn't going to be an animator, so I couldn't work at Pixar, but the Black Sheep at Pixar were the artists who thought differently. And so that became a great central idea for just hanging out with other people in the world who wanted to be taking a less traveled by path, so to speak. So that's how it all started.
And the notion of the inner artist, I've always believed that I'm not a painter, but I'm certainly a creative. I'm not, that idea that everybody has something in that might be cooking, it might be knitting, it might be anything, but I feel that our educational system slots people in ways that aren't necessarily natural. And instead, they're going to say, you're good at math, so you're going to go in this way. You're good at science, you're good at history, you're good at writing, you're good at these things. And I think that people from an early age are discouraged from finding their inner artist. Do you agree?
I personally do agree. And that's part of my passion for this whole undertaking. And I think, I always ask people, what do you think your inner artist is? And sometimes people know really quickly, like you would probably say storyteller pretty quickly.
Sure.
At least as one of the aspects of your artist. And I would say
Sure.
the same. And that may be why you and I have such an easy, natural connection. Other people might say dancer, other people might say painter, but a lot of other people will not know how to answer. And it's usually with people like that where they might have to take a few days to think about it. And usually they'll go back to their childhood and they'll think about, well, what was it that I did just for fun and to play that was creative and artistic as a kid? And when they can tap into that and kind of reconnect with that side of themselves, it's very empowering. It's very inspiring. It's liberating. So that's something that I've just noticed personally, is that there's so many people that, for the people who are artistic and creative with the bulk of their lives and identity, it's very understood. It's very, there's an awareness there. But for many other people, it takes not only just stopping and thinking about, well, what part of me is artistic that may be inside that I'm not nourishing, but also who am I hanging out with and who am I spending time with? And that's why the notion of community is so important for us, why we have outposts all around the world, to be able to support people who just want to be taking a more human path, want to be taking a more artistic, finding that more artistic side, but they just feel stifled by society, whether it's education, as you say, which certainly felt stifling to me, but also just the peer group you're with. If you're spending time with people who are, not to shit on lawyers and bankers, but those happen to be groups I spent a lot of time with when I was in my 20s. You won't really be motivated to do creative things because those types of professions don't really incent people to be artists per se. But if you spend time with people who tend to be more towards creative path, it starts to change the way you look at the world and free you up to be more creative. So we try to create those pods of community all around the world.
Yeah, and community is a big part of this, but it's interesting because, and I want to hear a little bit about the artists specifically, and I've met a couple of them, and how you're empowering that, but it's also saying, okay, it's not just like, hey, we're going to give some money or something, we're going to connect, and we're going to help these artists find an avenue, and give me just a couple quick specific examples of some of the artists.
Well, so we have a formal artists in residence program where it's singers, it's fine artists, fine painters, it's people who are doing immersive art, filmmakers, all those types. And I think, at this moment, you got to remember this, is that, after the Black Death back, centuries ago, the Renaissance was born. And now that we're going through this moment of darkness and a lot of death and a lot of fear about the future, it's really when we need the creative, artistic generation to rise again. And so we kind of, in a sense, believe that a new creative renaissance is needed. So we support that with artists in residence around the world. We support that with a lot of the initiatives that we do that are designed to help people free their inner artists, which can be done in a lot of different ways. And in bridging the different worlds, which you alluded to earlier. So what we found over the years is that, yes, there's a lot of pure artists that see themselves as black sheep, but there are also a lot of black sheep, people who see themselves as black sheep in the corporate world who are running companies and who just are feeling alone in that journey and raging against the machine, trying to make their workplace more human, trying to, be more innovative and creative, but they feel alone. So they come into our community to find allies. And it's the same is true for patrons and for philanthropists. So there's a thirst, hunger at the individual level that we've found and tapped into. And now there's a huge thirst at the cultural, societal level for a movement of sorts that we hope to be a small part of.
I want to come back to something you said, but about the Renaissance emanating from the Black Death, from the plague. And this is a horrible, challenging, difficult time, but there is also an opportunity here, not an opportunity to, obviously there's opportunity to find vaccines and all kinds of things, but really there's an opportunity to reimagine, to reorient, to rethink. And that's been very much in my mind. And since, you and I talked last week, and I kept thinking about that idea of the emergence of what's going to come out of this. And there will be wonderful realignments. Talk a little bit about that and any specifics that you see going on right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I co-authored a book on leadership called True North. And one of the big insights in that book was that when people go through severe setbacks or challenges, what we call crucibles, they end up growing a lot more. They end up learning a lot more. We don't learn much from our successes. We're not incented to. we're really challenged to learn from our failures or our setbacks. So this moment is, in a sense, a crucible for the world. And it's in those moments when you see opportunities to do things differently. And when it comes to coming up with ideas, and not just inspiration for doing things differently, but actually literally new ideas, I found that people turn to the black sheep. I mean, that's when they actually, people in government will come and turn to us and say, we need a big idea for the future of work. Or people in business will say, we need a new way of thinking about doing things. So there's a thirst for people and places to be the guiding light, the beacon for what's going to be next, and to be a part of leading that. I think that's a very new thing for our generation. I mean, I'm 43. I mean, the baby boom generation has been the generation in America, at least, that's led things and will continue to lead things, at least politically. But it's the first time when I felt like our generation, or generations that are younger, are really needed to step up and provide light, to provide fresh thinking and ideas and energy, because it's not going to come from the baby booms anymore.
No, it's so funny that the generational thing. I was born in 1965, so I'm not baby boom, and theoretically I'm Gen X, but I've never identified with it. You know, at the very end of the baby boom, very beginning of Gen X. But I think that is a little why I have a bit of a younger, more immature sensibility. But I think what's fascinating now is sort of like a lot of us have an opportunity to build the world we want to see, and you know, across generations. And I think there is this thing of saying, what does that look like, and how do we do it? Because there's untold economic devastation, there's astonishing loss of life, but there is this thing, and I saw somebody refer to it as the after. And I love that idea of the after, and what does that look like? And it doesn't have to be out of a Cormac McCarthy novel or some Stephen King horror show. It can have something that's helpful. Some of the work that you've been doing with Black Sheep, I'd love you to talk about, which is specifically around mental illness in the workplace. You had projects on homelessness in LA. And what I was struck by each of those is you guys saying, how about this? What if we did that? You know, and corporations being like, well, thank you for coming up with this innovative idea. Talk a little bit about those projects, and then how that applies to post-corona.
Yeah, mental health is something that we've spent about 18 months going deep on at both the local levels, so in places like New York or Los Angeles, or even in parts of Europe, as well as with people inside the big companies. And I would just sort of say, when the idea first came to the table, the way we work is we have these corporations that pay the bills, but the people who come and sit at the table have the same values as everyone else. And so the CEO of what was then CEO of SAP said, let's do something together with Black Sheep on mental health. Now, when he had that idea, we spent a lot of time talking with musicians about this. It's such a hugely relevant, hot topic in entertainment circles and music circles that we knew right off the bat that Lady Gaga and Chance the Rapper and a whole crew of artists were really passionate about that topic. Now, when we went back and started to meld minds with academics and researchers in this domain, we were told literally by one Stanford academic, this will never work. Nothing will ever come of trying to destigmatize mental health, because people tried this for 10 years. And what I said was that the culture is changing. The culture has changed so much that, 18 months later, 7 big companies want to do major initiatives, or already in the middle of major initiatives to destigmatize mental health. And so this back and forth between what people in culture can do to affect bottom-up change, and then how people, in the quote-unquote power structure can connect with those ideas to do things differently, is very powerfully expressed in mental health. And I think the next phase is, now that this whole, that people are all experiencing such stress and such anxiety in so many different ways with COVID, I think the next wave of mental health is again going to blend these worlds together And like last night, I was on a call with Kenneth Cole, and he's going to announce a big initiative. So you get people from fashion, you get people from business, you get people from the arts, all coming together. And before you know it, this will be a very mainstream topic of discussion and conversation, with lots of tools for people to be able to use to open up about something that even 2 years ago was extremely rare and difficult. So my whole point in illustrating that example is just that culture change is hard, but it's very possible when you get the right combination of forces together and you get them pulling oars in the same direction. Because I can just remember when the SAP CEO brought in Lady Gaga to their big convening, and she performed, and her mother was there, and they had a big conversation about mental health that was very formative for a lot of people last year across a bunch of different companies. Then, executives of other companies wanted to be involved. And then those companies can help support some of the initiatives that Lady Gaga's foundation is doing. And you just sort of see this toggling back and forth between the arts and people in the power structure to affect change. And they can't do it alone. They both need each other. And so it's a very hot vein, mental health right now. But I think we're going to see so many areas where, as the water flows out, and we're in the very early stages of however long this is going to last, but you're going to see all kinds of areas that have been very wasteful for a long time. Healthcare being an example. I mean, I think telehealth has already emerged as a very important new dimension to how we're going to receive healthcare in the future. Education, obviously, is another. And so I would just say what I'm paying attention to, and I think what a lot of people are paying attention to, is as that water flows out and as those unsustainable ways of doing things are exposed, there will be tremendous opportunity to fill that vacuum with new and better ways of doing things. And let's hope that can lead to a more sustainable world ultimately for the environment, because that's obviously one of the biggest needs that we need to fill with this generation.
Yeah, and I think there is a notion of humanists that this has to work for people, and you see a lot of things that are concerning about Amazon workers having to work side by side, or what people are being forced to do, and then you see a lot of opportunities too of people saying, oh wow, telemedicine is one thing for sure, but a lot of things where we can be more efficient, we can be smarter, but we can also be healthier from a self-care.
Be more human. Yeah.
Be more human.
Be more human. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. And I kind of wish I had said it first. Not that it's a competition, but I mean, you're really stealing the language that we cherish, right? I mean, mental health, getting out of the abstract layer of what it takes to achieve change inside an organization. It's like people just want to be connected. They just want to be genuinely connected, and they don't have that. Those tethers are often frayed in our culture today. I mean, men, for example, have on average, I think, one close friend, according to the research, maybe 1.5 close friends on average. So there's very little relational connective tissue, and that leads to all kinds of implications from mental health and other things. And so, yeah, if we can use this period to realize what's important and how important the human connection is, that will be a great step forward.
Yeah, one of the people we had on earlier iteration of this was Gillian Richardson, who I met through a Black Sheep event, wrote the book on Lonely Planet. And the research shows that 75% of Americans are unsatisfied with their friendships. There's also really deep research that shows, Dan Buehner's done a lot of this in Blue Zones, talking about the people who live the longest are people who, eat Mediterranean diet and don't smoke, but have lots of friends, and that's a big part of it. And I think, you and I use some of the same language because we have a lot of similar worldview. And of course, Black sheep are original thinkers and original thinkers are Black sheep. And we've talked about it before, and that intersection is pretty spot on. But I think that is a really key connection. And for you as someone who is a gatherer, and you do it so well, and I consider myself like a pretty high level gatherer, and I watch you and I learn, and I'm like, wow, how is it for you, one, not being able to gather people and dealing with your own loneliness, but two, the future of gathering? How do you see this coming forward?
I probably should think about that more. It's a good question. I obsess about culture. I obsess about, what are the values and how do those values get expressed? And what I've found is that we have a core group of people that live and breathe this set of values around generativity, around how do you create together, how do you co-conspire, how do you there's obviously no assholes in that context, but so I've just been watching to see how that culture develops digitally. And the there are people who fall away in moments like these from a community that depends on in-person type interactions, but that's also a good signal for us, because we really always just bet on the core and always just bet on the culture and keep building. And it's really strengthened the core. They're interacting a lot more. They're getting to know each other better, even though it's digitally. And we're working on these ideas around the new creative renaissance that are really inspiring to us. So,
can you share any of the little deeper into the ideas around the creative renaissance?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the original creative renaissance, I'll give you a couple of examples of things that we're working on. One is that there are workshops, so a lot of the artists were involved with workshops where typically you had kind of an elder master craftsperson who was leading that workshop. And today it's easy to replicate that digitally. You can get, say, 3 artists and 3 engineers and give them a mandate or a problem that's interesting and find them a patron and have them crank away in an experimental way. And maybe the outcome is just an artistic outcome, or maybe it can be a tangible outcome that can be scaled. But we intend to do a lot of that. And then we also are very passionate about what is the new patron society. That's another concept that became kind of pronounced in the first Renaissance. That
the Medicis,
the Medicis for sure, and lots of others. But sure. The Medicis were the most well known, and were the wealthiest. I mean, they're a fascinating family who, had their different generations. But I mean, a lot of the Medici generosity was motivated by their fear of being usurers. Usury back then was a real stigma, certainly religiously. But anyway, who are the new Medicis? And so those will be some individuals, but also it could be brands, so long as the brands respect artistry. So we're exploring all those types of models. And what we found is just everyone from CEOs to just the artists in residence that we've had, they're all thrilled about this. It's like the time is now.
I think that's so much a big part of this is the partnering and the building of community, and those people all saying, okay, we're working towards something that's, people first, that is, planet first, that is sustainable. A lot of the code buzzwords we're using.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I would just say something on that, David, is that I think the thing that I feel very, very lucky to have had is a vantage point into a lot of different worlds. It's, yes, a lot of artists and a lot of people in the higher ranks of business and these different cultures all around the world where we have outposts. And, it's very easy to, in today's day and age, to sort of become so frustrated with the lack of progress, so to speak, on sustainability, as an example, that, one starts to lose a little bit of faith in the institutions and systems. But the people inside those entities, as you know very well, often have just the right heart for this type of work. They need allies. They need ideas. They need allies, and they need trust. And if you can be trusted, generate allies, bring the right insights for the right problems at the right time, there's no shortage of things you can't do. because resources will be available for those types of ideas. And so the hard part, the really difficult part, is building the bridges between the worlds. That's the hardest nut to crack. And I wouldn't say we're there yet, but yeah, because the artists have one mindset and the business people have another mindset, and the researchers and thought leaders, they all have a kind of a different mindset as well. It's everybody has their own languages, they have their own just ways of doing things, and they're not used to hanging out with people from the other worlds. So there's a translation that has to happen. That's sometimes easy, sometimes impossible.
Yeah.
So
no, I can see that. It's same planet, different worlds.
yeah, it's mindset, right? I mean, I used to work in venture capital, and there's a mindset that venture capitalists see the world through. It's, it's, yes, I want to help entrepreneurs, but I really also am very competitive. I want to beat my competitor, and I want to make money. And
right,
with artists, you just don't, that never comes up really. It's like, how do you collaborate? How do you relate? How do you exist?
And how do you create? How do you create? Like, that's the thing is, and any which way to it that feels right and feels doable. You mentioned True North. You also wrote a book called Little Bets that really, as I understand, looks at how people adjust. It's like tweaks rather than saying, wait, I'm putting it all on black. It's saying, wait, I'm going to take these ideas and then shift them and shift them and shift them. And that's these, you talk about Amazon, Starbucks, Google, Chris Rock, the comedian, of course, and how he figures out his sets. Do you feel Little Bets are still as relevant in this new world that's emerging as they were before?
Well, I mean, I guess one of the punchlines to Little Bets is that there's really not a lot of other ways to create. I mean, there are certain people who can envision ideas and just in one sketch put it down on paper and have it be perfect. And apparently Mozart was that way. But no, it's virtually impossible. And so, just peeling away the veneer of the creative process is a big lesson from that book. And I don't know why people don't talk about it more often. But so to answer your question, of course, this is a time when it's crucial to be experimental. And the whole fundamental definition of a little bet is it's an affordable loss. You're putting either time or money in that you can afford to lose to try to get information, to try to discover if you're on the right path. So
I think about the films I've made, and I look at the early iterations and the multiple bad ideas that led to a good film. Then let's try this, and you think of the amount of edits that we made that didn't work, and you're just like, wow, how could I have been so stupid? But it's the only way to get to something good. Tell me, you working on a new book? Can you give us a little sense of that?
Yeah, I am. I'm early days on it. And,
sure.
I always wanted to write a book that wasn't a business book. It was more of a book about a story, being a storyteller at heart.
Yeah.
And so I've got the elements of a story in my mind that's a little bit of has a little bit of the story of the black sheep to it. But it's also a book that needs to be discovered, which is a thrilling and terrifying prospect at once. So I've written maybe a chapter or maybe a chapter and a half, but really need to discover the story and tell it.
I think this is a great time to be doing that. I think about, I have some film friends who are in editing now. I'm like, what a great time to be editing, because it's really hard to shoot. We've talked about a film that I'm interested in making about fear, and
But you're too afraid to make it.
First of all, go to hell. Second of all, it was interesting because this all went down. I'm like, okay, I can't develop a film now. And after talking to you last week, and of course it's been rattling in my head, and that's the insidious nature of what you do, Peter Sims, is you get people to believe in themselves again. And I've really been like, okay, this is actually the right time to start developing it. And it is the space, because I can't go shoot, but I can develop it. And that doesn't take that much. You know, I can do some interviews online. I can certainly research. I can create the materials that'll get it into production when we can go into production as filmmakers. And it's interesting, the idea of being afraid of making it. It's less that, but it's intimidating for sure. And you know, I know, having been up a couple of mountaintops, that when you start at the top, you look up there, you're like, oh damn, how am I going to get up there? And what's the route? I don't even know. And but the only way to do it is to start going up, and going up smartly, and going up, but going
just
up.
develop a concept, because I mean, there's always hurdles that we can set for ourselves to any creative endeavor, and just go to the next hurdle and see how it feels. I mean, when I wrote Little Bets, I was so terrified that I wasn't going to be able to write a book. I felt very similar to what you described. And, you know, so, well, I'm just going to try to write a proposal. And then I got the proposal done, and it was compelling to people. And so then I said, well, I guess I have to try to do this. But before I even got to the proposal, I thought, well, can I just get an agent?
Right.
Can I get a 2-pager? Was the earliest manifestation before trying to get an agent. So these little hurdles eventually build up to something that, I mean, you know this. I mean, you look at your film, it's like, you look at the things in your life you're really proud of. The creations are thrilling. So it's,
Well, and they're much more thrilling if there were some hurdles that were, you know, that you had to go up and over or around, you know, and I think that's right. And you know, what happens in this next iteration is fascinating. I know you're going to be a part of it. I know Black Sheep's going to be a part of it. Original thinkers, you know, we will intersect. We know that already. I'm really grateful for you coming on and on OT Presents and being a part of this. And you know, folks, you know, read Little Bets, look for True North, look for his new book, blacksheep.org, or is it .com?
BLK. But yeah, and definitely ask what your inner artist is. I mean, that's a key question.
That's
I would
big,
you know, and
you know, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
And this is the time to embrace that. This is the time to say, okay, what is that, and how am I going to do that? And you see it, you know, people saying, okay, wait, I have time to be creative and have a space to do that. It can really happen. Peter Sims, it's nice to see you, man. It's nice to see you. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Our actually in person, and that'll happen when it happens. But I'm glad you're part of the Original Thinkers Orbit, and I'm honored to be a small part of the Black Sheep community, and look forward to whatever this all means, and whatever comes along the way.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, take care of yourself.